Okay, let's get into this. Imagine hearing that a really huge university system, one that's basically a cornerstone for research, jobs, education in a whole state, could potentially lose a massive chunk of its federal funding. Not state money, federal.
Yeah, and the reporting we're looking at suggests this isn't just like a hypothetical. It's something the Trump administration is reportedly actively considering right now.
And specifically targeting California, right?
Yeah.
The UC and CSU systems.
Exactly, University of California and California State University. So our mission here in this deep dive is to really unpack the key details from these sources you've shared, figure out the reported reasons, what the potential impact might be, and how different people mentioned in the reporting are reacting.
Okay, so what's the core action here? What are the sources saying is actually being discussed?
Well, the reporting indicates that agencies are being told to identify and maybe withhold large federal grants going to California. And the focus, it seems, is really sharp on the UC and CSU systems. There's even talk of a potential full termination.
Wow. Full termination of federal grants. That's a strong language.
It is. And according to these sources, this could apparently start moving forward, potentially as soon as Friday.
As soon as Friday. Okay. So what's the justification being offered, according to this reporting? Why?
So the sources quote a White House spokesman, Krish Desai. He apparently linked the potential cuts directly to California's state-level policies. The quote mentioned is, "No taxpayer should be forced to fund the demise of our country," citing things like California's energy policy, immigration, other state stuff.
Okay, so broad state policies.
Right, but there's another layer. The sources also say the universities specifically are being targeted over alleged antisemitism on campus. They mention this is similar to actions taken against Harvard and Columbia previously.
So it's kind of a mix. State policy disagreements and specific campus conduct concerns.
That seems to be the picture painted by the sources. Though, importantly, they also include a caveat from Mr. Desai. He reportedly said, "No final decisions have been made, and any discussion suggesting otherwise should be considered pure speculation."
Ah, okay. So discussions are happening, consideration is happening, but no final trigger pulled yet. That's a key detail from the sources.
Definitely adds some uncertainty, yeah.
And looking bigger picture, the sources mention that just singling out one state, especially California, for cuts this big would be, well, pretty unusual.
Absolutely. The reporting frames it that way. Unusual scope, unusual focus on just one state. And, it doesn't come out of nowhere. The sources connect it to President Trump's reported history of using federal funding as leverage against California.
Right. There's a history there.
Yeah. They mentioned things like a recent reported cut of about, $126 million in flood prevention funds and past fights over wildfires, even a transgender athlete issue.
So a pattern of friction, maybe. If this reported plan did go ahead, what kind of impact are we talking about? The sources must touch on that.
Oh, yeah. Substantial impact. I mean, think about the size of the UC and CSU systems. The reporting points out UC alone is the state's third largest employer. That's huge.
Third largest, wow.
And beyond just jobs, both systems are described as major engines of research, particularly in fields like biotech, medicine.
So cutting off major federal funding, that would ripple outwards, presumably. Beyond just the universities themselves.
For sure. The sources imply big consequences for the state's economy, its workforce, those key research areas. It's all connected.
Okay, so with that kind of potential impact, how are people mentioned in the sources responding? What are the reactions?
Well, on the Democratic side, pretty strong reactions reported. Representative Zoe Lofgren is quoted calling it a bully move. She apparently linked it directly to California being a blue state and said she'd fight back on this, challenge it in court.
Right. And Pelosi, too.
Yeah, former Speaker Nancy Pelosi reportedly echoed that, vowing to fight what she called a cruel crusade. And interestingly, the reporting notes California's legislature had already set aside $25 million specifically to fight administration policies. About $5 million of that's reportedly been spent.
So they were kind of bracing for potential legal fights already. What about California Republicans? What's their perspective in the sources?
Representative Darrell Issa is quoted. He said he wasn't aware of any imminent cancellations, but did confirm he'd met with university folks who were concerned.
Okay.
And his reported message to them was, well, different. He apparently advised them to focus on advocating for specific grants, making the case for each one, rather than just a general don't cut us stance. He sort of implied that approach might have contributed to this situation.
Interesting strategic advice there. And do the sources mention how the universities themselves might push back? Legally, perhaps?
It's mentioned briefly. The exact legal strategy isn't clear from the reporting, but they float the possibility of the state's Attorney General, Rob Bonta, getting involved.
Yeah.
Representing them, perhaps?
Got it.
So wrapping up this deep dive, what the sources lay out is this potential really significant move by the administration targeting federal funds for California's universities. The reported justifications range from state policies to campus issues. The potential impact, according to the sources, is huge jobs research.
Yeah, and triggering these really strong but differing reactions from politicians mentioned in the reporting.
Exactly. A real clash described.
It definitely paints a picture from the sources of serious political tension with potentially massive real-world fallout. Yeah. So considering these different perspectives, the administration citing policy and conduct versus critics calling it political leverage, what does this whole situation maybe reveal to you about that tricky balance between federal money and state autonomy? And maybe looking forward, how universities might even navigate pressures like this, something for us all to think about.